Hotep family, Kim Smy, and a BB Toomey. As always, I'm going to start things up at the 6 minute mark. I'm going to give people the opportunity to come in. Today's live stream will be about Canaanite Carthage. If you've already been studying or are familiar with Carthage, you know that it was burned and destroyed by the Romans. So I will be reconstructing that history back together for us. So again, like, share, and subscribe, and I will be starting up at the 6 minute mark. Come in, and subscribe. I'm going to start here momentarily at 6 minutes. Again, we're going to be live streaming today to reconstruct the history of Canaanite Carthage. In the meantime, like, share, and subscribe. So it is important to teach our own heritage in North Africa. As we know, other groups are trying to claim what belongs to us. Canaanite Carthage is the most misrepresented African civilization next to Kemet. If you didn't already know, Canaanite Carthage was a major seaport in the Mediterranean Sea. The Carthaginians were the descendants of the Meshwesh civilization and the Canaanites who fled Assyrian expansion. So to start off, since we are reconstructing this history, we are going to go to American academics to see what they have to say. One scholarly reference is UNESCO. This is an archaeological site. It is in the Gulf of Tunisia. And the chronology for Canaanite Carthage starts in the 8th century BC and ends in 146 BCE. And again, I want to reinforce that before we get into this misrepresentation by American academia, that the Canaanites, as well as the new civilization of Carthage, is a black civilization based on the Abrahamic point of view. The Canaanite Carthaginians are known as the quote-unquote Hamites in the Table of Nations. From the Greek perspective, the Canaanites are the Phoenicians. And from the Roman perspective, the Canaanites are Punic. I want to take note of the book, the scholarly book called Phoenicians, Peoples of the Past, Phoenicians. This is by Glenn E. Marco. He documents that Carthage was in a strategic position, and he also documents that the Punic religion is related to the Canaanite and Kemetic spiritual system. I also want to reinforce the scholarship of Czech Antijoke and what he teaches about Carthage. In his book, The African Origin of Civilization, on page 65, he reinforces the racial identity of North Africans, who are now known as Libyan. And we have to additionally deal with the anachronistic term known as Berber. But in this book, he reinforces that civilization does not start in North Africa. It starts from the south and expands into other places of Africa. In his Civilization or Barbarism book on page 126, he reinforces that the conflict between Rome and Carthage was ethnically distinct. So again, he is reinforcing the blackness of Canaanite Carthage. We are also going to analyze what the Greco-Romans say about Canaanite Carthage. What we're looking at now is a vase, a Greek vase. You see a lot of these Greek vases with a depiction of a dark or black military figure. This is the Greek record of the Canaanites, and they retell the story using mythology. So mythologically, this is a Trojan, but within the mythology, they assigned a Punic identity to the figure and depicted as a black being. I want to point out the Greek historian who has the most detailed documentation of Canaanite Carthage. In his book of history, he points out all the details. He talks about the Magog dynasty, and he also talks about the final moments of Canaanite Carthage. We also have other Greek historians who document Hanno the Navigator. We also have a mythological story that recounts the origins of the founding of Carthage. Although they renamed the characters, this is a mythological reconstruction of the Carthaginian history. We are going to highlight the founder of Canaanite Carthage. If you did not know, the founder of Canaanite Carthage was a princess from Tyre in Canaan. She is the founder of the new city, Carthage. Carthage is a new Canaanite city, hence the name Canaanite Carthage. To correctly pronounce Canaanite Carthage, it is Kanaanite Karthage. Based on American academics, the founder of Carthage is depicted as a beige pale female. They often refer to her as Alyssa. They pronounce Dido, the name as Dido, but it should be Dido. And while they misrepresent the founder of Carthage, they do admit that she is indeed a princess, a Canaanite princess who became the first queen. Now, to correctly reconstruct the image of Dido, we are going to look at contemporary figurines. What we're looking at now is a figurine from the 7th century BCE. This is contemporary with the time of Dido's founding of Carthage. So with that in mind, we start our analysis with this figurine. And because it is a tribute figurine, and most figurines would be created in the image of the standing elite during the time, or contributed to a standing elite during the time of the action, we can identify this figurine with Queen Dido. Not only is her attributes comedic, but because they're comedic, and we know that Canaan had comedic influence as well, this comedic influence now becomes the framework to rebuilding the identity in Carthage. And with this reconstruction of the 7th century BCE figurine, we come up with what we are looking at now. And again, because of the timeline and the method in which figurines are created and made to pay homage for certain feats, we can identify Queen Dido correctly. I also want to highlight the comedic influence of Canaanite Carthage. Once again, since the Canaanite Carthaginians and the Canaanites, from the biblical perspective, are the people of Ham, then we know that Canaanite Carthage was black. And we begin to understand why Canaanite Carthage was also comedic. So Bes is well known to be present in Carthage. Through archaeology, there was 1,000+ Bes amulets and relics discovered at sites in Carthage. And these match the 26th dynasty reverence of Bes. I want to also point out the divination system of Canaanite Carthage. I will leave this here and then I will go over it momentarily. So as you can see, Astarte begins in the 7th century BCE, at the same time that it is founded, or Carthage is founded by Dido. You can see that Tanit is parallel to the Ankh. We see Bes, and we see Baal Hamon. Baal Hamon is parallel to Asar and Rashif. And this divination was also present in Canaan, hence Canaanite Carthage. I also want to highlight Baal Hamon. He was the primary divination of Canaanite Carthage. I want to also point out that Baal Hamon, after the fall of Carthage, begins to be Romanized. And from a Romanization of Baal Hamon, you have Serapis. So this is the prototype for Serapis. But other than that, you can see Baal Hamon's Kemetic influence. See his Kemetic-like crown. That's typically worn by queens of Kemet. I want to also point out Mago the First. Mago the First is known as the founder of Canaanite Carthage. He is a military general. He is responsible for militarizing Carthage. I want to obviously address that he is briefly mentioned by American academia. I want to also point out that anytime there is any lesson about Carthage, Mago the First is always left out, and the reason for that is because he was a dominant general and he used his military might and his military prowess to dominate southern part of Europe. American academia, while it hides the identity of many Carthaginians, they do admit certain things, certain truths. But with that said, because American academia does not provide us with a true identity for Mago the First, we will do it ourselves, and we will do it in the same manner as we reconstructed Queen Dido. I will leave this here momentarily, and then I will go over the methodology for identifying King Mago the First. So again, one thing that's interesting is when you do your analysis on Mago the First, this figurine does pop up. However, academia does not name it Mago the First. It labels it simply as a praying Punic terracotta. It is dated around the same time frame as Mago the First, which is a step in the right direction to trying to identify this figurine. Because one thing we know for sure is when figurines are created, and this is just not in Kemet, this is anywhere. When you create a figurine, it has meaning. So it has an identity. It has a attributation. It is being attributed to somebody. So moving on, we see that the crown is a sign of divination and royalty. So again, when considering the time frame, we know that if any figure is to be immortalized into a statue or figurine, it would be Mago. And that's especially the case if we find this figurine in the same place that he civilized and influenced. So with that said, we can successfully provide a identity to this figurine. We also have an image to work off of for Mago the First. I want to go over all of Mago the First accomplishments and contributions to Canaanite Carthage. Mago the First, a general, established the first army and navy. He took Sardinia, and again, the figurine, the praying Punic figurine, was found in Sardinia, so we can be accurate in our assignment of that figurine to Mago the First. I want to go over Hanno the Navigator. I want to let it be known that in addition to Kemet, you have many seafaring and maritime nations, to include the Swahili states, the Kushites. You have your Carthaginians as well, obviously. You have your Malian fleet. A lot of people don't want to accept that Mali had a fleet, but if you are a rich empire, it should not be far-fetched to understand why the richest empire at that time would have a navy fleet. So, based on the Periplus of Hannu and Greek records, he had a fleet of 60 ships with 30,000 merchants ready to civilize southern Italy or southern Europe. I'm going to talk about Hannibal Barca. Hannibal Barca is known as one of the greatest military strategists. We have many great military strategists, but Hannibal Barca is one of them. First, I want to address the misrepresentation of Hannibal Barca. American academia does not readily show accurate depictions of Hannibal Barca. So we will reconstruct the identity of Hannibal Barca with what remains. And I want to reiterate that while they do try to disrupt the identity of Hannibal Barca, they admit his military prowess. They do educate you pretty adequately on Hannibal Barca. But since American academia misrepresents his identity, we will construct it, and we will use the coin of Trasimeno to do that. I will leave this here momentarily, and I will go over it. So because this coin was left at the same time, in the same place of a known battle where he was victorious, then we know that Hannibal Barca's identity becomes more clear. If you didn't already know, when studying history, coins are the best way to conclude on a person's identity, whether that person be a king, a royal elite, or a religious figure. We use coins to identify accurately. We also use other coins to identify Hannibal Barca. The coin of Trasimeno is not the only coin. All of these coins similarly show African features. So we begin to understand what Hannibal Barca truly looks like. And of course, we are going to go over his contributions to Carthage and Rome, for that matter. Of course, his contribution to Rome was indirectly his military strategy, just like the Greco-Romans always have done. They steal things from the enemy and use it against the enemy. Hannibal Barca is known for multiple victories over Rome. So a lot of times we tend to think that we always got beat up by European nations, and the opposite is true. If you study history, the fall of most African nations was due to the betrayal of another African nation. Either the betrayal or the conflict of another African nation. And before I conclude, I want to go over the people of Canaanite Carthage. It's very important to identify these people correctly. This is our heritage. Archaeology left behind a lot of evidence of the identity of the Carthaginians, and this is amid mainstream academia's whitewashing or whiteology of North Africa. These are the people of Canaanite Carthage, reconstructed and reborn. Among some common people, you have Queen Dido and King Mago. I want us to take a look at more figurines from Carthage. You can clearly see that that is Kemetic influence. Here is another one. Again, here is Mago 1 or Mago the First. Here is a funerary mask from Carthage. Again, we have Baal Hamon. We have Mago. I'm going to close out in a few minutes, but I am going to leave you with the drums. If you have questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I will be returning. I will try to go live every 4 to 5 days. But again, the point of this stream is to reinforce the identity of North Africa, the native identity of North Africa, which should be obvious at this point. And again, the Carthaginians were descendants of the Meshwesh and the Canaanites fleeing Assyrian expansion. So we begin to understand why Carthage was formed, Carthage's role in the Mediterranean in relation to not only Rome and Greece, but Kemet and the Meshwesh. Like I educated on my last stream before, I think it was 2 streams ago, the Meshwesh is the native Libyan dynasty of Kemet, another black dynasty. The Canaanites are black, and we know this based on the biblical perspective, being that the Canaanites are in the Hamitic nations for the table of nations in the Bible. Again, like, share, and subscribe. I'm going to be ending here pretty soon. Again, I also take donations. The QR code is in the top left corner. If you do not have access to the QR code, my Cash App is running at the bottom of the screen. So I hope you enjoyed this live stream about Kanaanite Karthage. Again, I shall return within 3 to 4 days with another live stream.